This is Changeling the podcast.
Welcome to episode 3 of Changeling the podcast. I'm your host, Joshua, and with us is also Puka. Hello, Puka.
Greetings.
So yeah, what are we doing this episode, Puka?
I'm here to take names and talk changelings, but you do what you want. I mean,
Are we all out of names?
Sometimes you set out to take names and you get through the first few hundred and then you realize there's still so many names to take and you just get tired and you make yourself a cup of tea and you sit down and then your mind moves on to other things and you find yourself sitting with the Changeling book in your hands, ready to talk about Changeling instead. That's how my evenings go sometimes.
Give a slight content warning for this book. It may induce bedlam. We are talking about the first edition core book for Changeling the Dreaming, where it all started after it had the pre-start from our previous episode.
So I suppose we're just kind of going through and doing a deep dive, a thorough read, and sharing our findings, yeah?
Yeah, we're going to go in order of the book because I think we both read the book in order and wrote down our notes in order, so that works. Core book is a bit different from most other core books. I know you had some ideas about to bring that just to the structure and organization of it.
Yeah. Well, and even more than the structure, what strikes me most is the aesthetic of it, because, I try to project back to the before times and being a gamer in the mid-90s. And not that I played World of Darkness right when Changeling came out, but I can imagine, after Vampire and Werewolf and Mage and Wraith, you have these very sort of heavy designs and lots of gloom and doom in some cases. And then you get to Changeling and it is just full color all the way through, not work margins that are like bright and shiny. And then in the preface, in the tradition of opening with sort of an in-universe character giving the backstory of the splat, we have this treatise by True Thomas, and it's done in this style where it's a series of photographs, which I was thinking about, this might be the first time we actually had like full 2-page photographs in any World of Darkness book. So there's that immediate change.
I can't think of any World of Darkness book that quite looks like this. It's
I mean, V5 there's a little bit now because they have more photo stuff in there, but yeah,
it's not technically the beginning.
That's true. That's true.
It's a little. I mean, it's got the like blurb, title page, table of contents, and then a thing about how no one should ever grow up, and then the photos.
And then the photos. Which is also, I can't think of any World of Darkness book that has this little preface like that gets philosophical about the nature of growing up and avoiding it. So
yeah, it's not directly about the game. It's about it's to the reader, not the This photo spread is so incredibly 90s.
Yes,
and fitting so much of my life in the 90s.
And it's all like object. So for anyone who hasn't seen it, each photo spread has like page after page of the actual text that you're meant to be reading, but then it's all on this table surrounded by objects. And we have, among other things, a stack of, is it 3.5-inch floppy disks? It's been so long since I've actually had to use one that I can't remember. Mm-hmm. We have a deck of magic cards.
We have art from the book.
Yeah.
Like actual art pieces that are later used in the book, but it's like the original paper for it.
We have a business card for the cover artist, Henry Higginbottom. So that's cool.
Yes.
Oh, and a little... Well, I don't know who did these photos, but we have, on one of the pages, we have that business card for the artist. And then, in a slight Mage connection, perhaps, a little, place card for Kathy Ryan. So, some names from the White Wolf stable appearing.
Yeah, we got cookies that are an Alice in Wonderland reference. And my favorite thing is the, I'm always bad at pronouncing his last name, Alexander Siddig.
Yeah, yes.
Dr. Bashir from Deep Space Nine. started deep facing.
Autographed.
He's just sort of little autographed photo of him in the corner.
Autographed pinup.
Next to some donuts.
You know what? He can live on my wall or desk anytime.
Yes. Midsummer's Night's Dream.
Bowl of ice cream with some cigarettes stubbed out in it. Headless troll doll.
No, it's got a head. It's decapitated, but the head's right next to it, isn't it?
An unlucky troll doll. Yeah. There's also, actually, I just noticed this. On that same page, there's a coffee cup with what looks like a claw coming out of it.
Oh my goodness, I never noticed that. That is really cool. Oh, and the map of Concordia, the sort of North American Changeling Kingdom.
There appears to be a palantir on the last page.
A what? I don't recognize.
The Seeing Stones from Lord of the Rings. I don't know if that's what it's intended to be, but, you know.
I haven't decoded there's like writing tidbits. I wonder if there's like deep lore significance to the... Oh, it's mentioning, there's some writing here that is in fiction. Yeah, there's like an invitation to Duke Aeon's ball somewhere. Like, you can just kind of go through this again and again and keep finding little tidbits. Yes.
But I do like how it is presenting so much of the world. It's kind of like in I want to say the second edition Vampire core book, there's a letter from Vlad Tepes' Dracula to Mina Harker explaining who the kindred are, what they do, what they're like. And that's what this is most similar to, I suppose.
That was a similar publishing date, wasn't it?
Around 90, early 90s. It all blends together at some point. But yeah, that kind of... There's this genre of literature called the Mirrors for Princes, and it's like, like Machiavelli's The Prince, it's this sort of instructional literature for monarchs. And that's what this strikes me as, because it's written to High King David, explaining glamour, explaining banality, giving the history of the Accordance War, all of these little, here's the things you need to know to rule properly sort of stuff. But yeah, it's a very fascinating...
This book's very big on setting mood, theme, and tone, and not having minimal page count to get across the rules in as quick as possible. And
it definitely sets this vibe up of like, I don't know if you have the SCA, the Society of Creative Anachronism.
Yes, we do.
It reminds me of like SCA chapter president kind of feel. That's the best way I can think of to describe it. Just like very eclectic and based in folk music and fantasy literature and music concerts, talking about nobility and all that. Anyway.
We can move on. So then it's organized. So that's a little preview, the little essay about not growing up, and then all those spreads, and then a bit of the sort of stained glass looking art. And then we get into book 1, Changeling. So the chapters are organized into 3 books. Starting out with some nice art of a she warrior. I think it's the same one on Nobles the Shining Host. I've definitely seen that picture somewhere else.
So this is Lee, who is the sort of signature she character from the Immortalized Chronicle, which we can talk about later on. But this is an example of the Dieterlesi art that I'm so very fond of.
Yeah, then we go chapter 1, Introduction. This introduction, actually, I thought did a pretty good job of... I've read a lot of these and a lot of White Wolf and other role-playing games. I thought it does a reasonable job of explaining what a role-playing game is and sort of how to do things. Yeah, they talk about Mind's Eye Theater and Changeling LARPs in here.
Which must have been Mind's Eye Theater must have been fairly recently created at that point, yeah?
From my understanding, when Vampire the Masquerade first came out, it did not take long for people to start LARPing it. And then kind of caught up on making books on how to do this thing. But it's interesting to talk about people having LARPed Changeling before there was a Changeling.
Again, there's that SCA connection.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it almost strikes me as it's written as though it might be the reader's first role-playing game.
Yes.
And I almost had the sense as I read it, if you were a 12-year-old who wanted to run a World of Darkness game, this is the book for you.
Yeah. No, I mean, they do that. If you read through like any of the, certainly 90s, but I think like in general, World of Darkness books do that. They're always starting out assuming you haven't played a role-playing game before.
Maybe it's just the vibe that's making me think this is an especially friendly one for...
Oh, I think it would be. And I think they did a very good job of like breaking down how to run it. And I think they gave very good advice, better than I typically see. I think later it's more when they get into more of the detailed advice, but Yeah, this is just sort of giving the background of what a role playing game is. Though they do claim that when you get a bit of experience, you can do character creation in half an hour, and I'm not so sure about that part.
Well, you can organize dots in half an hour. That's certainly doable.
That's true.
I want to call out a quote on page 40, if I may. It's under the header Changeling Kind, and it says, "You lead a double life, alternating between reality and fantasy. Caught in the middle ground between dream and wakefulness, you are neither wholly fey nor wholly mortal, but burdened with the cares of both. Finding a happy medium between the wild and insane world of the fey and the deadening banal world of humanity is essential if you are to remain whole." And I find that, I think that's the point. If I had to say the point with a capital th and a capital p, that would be it for the entire game. And I think that it often gets lost in games because people want to lean very heavily into the fey side or the epic side or whatever. And just that little reminder of like, you are still also human.
Yes.
That's important.
Yep. And we can sort of address how well each, when we do the 3 editions, how well each, where it strikes that balance.
Yeah.
Good.
We also get a lovely list of lexicon at the end, which is de rigueur for World of Darkness books. And I love all these words that you never see again. Yeah,
I've noticed there's less capitalized in here than I've seen in later Changeling and other White Wolf books.
That may be.
And yeah, so I was marking, I noticed some stuff from the lexicon that just struck out for me from later Changeling. It talked about how like Gallane can just be Kithane, that like a type of Changeling, like from the normal type of Changeling that's not, they're just, oh, that one's a bit weird.
Yeah.
Like we don't really know them as well. Yeah, and there's something kind of like in Mage the Ascension Orphans, they talk about mongrels. It's another concept I don't remember ever seeing in Changeling. They also talk about how you can be noble and commoner at the same time. And apparently chrysalis is only used by stodgy old she as a term without providing any other term for that thing, which is the point where you become a changeling or where you're awakened to who you are as a changeling.
What else would you call it?
Yes, but it's under the old form, which is the terms used by nobility, especially she, seldom used by younger exiles. Well, but everyone just went through so somebody went through their chrysalis, doesn't have a word for what they just did in this list. But
I'm going to start using some of these, like saying Calofe and Fujer and all these other ones. Interestingly, I don't know if you noticed, but Fomorian and Tuath Jdanan do not appear, I don't think, anywhere in the book.
Nope. Yeah, well, I don't remember. Yeah, I don't remember seeing either. And they don't have Fomorian. It was very distinct on that, actually.
So we are pre that part of the meta plot in this book.
Yeah, there's a number of things that we think of as, I think the two of us probably think of as very core to Changeling that aren't in here.
Yeah.
So the next is the setting chapter.
The standard World of Darkness ethos exploration.
I thought this did a pretty good job as well.
Can I say, I think the frontispiece for this chapter, which is the Deterluzi art for the Puka, is probably my favorite art in the entire book. So we see the process of shape changing into a rabbit with a jester's cap, because why not?
Yeah, I found some interesting stuff. Do you want to dive in right here, or do you want to?
Let's dive. Let's do it.
Yes. So, like, one thing I found is it talks about Tir na Nog as it describes being an empire post-sundering. Changeling history. We should probably get a little bit into that. There's sort of the prehistory where the dreaming, which is sort of the realm of the Fae, and the mortal world were all just sort of intermixed and indistinguishable for the most part. There's the sundering, where the two had sort of become separate worlds, but the Fae are still wandering around as Fae in this mortal world. And then there's the shattering, which is described as not happening everywhere all at once, same as the sundering not really happening everywhere all at once in here. The shattering, where it sort of became impossible to continue on as a typical Fae, and a lot of the Shi and whatnot went back to the homeland in Arcadia, and most of the other changelings were kind of stuck behind here. And Fae got stuck behind here and became changelings. But it talks about here like how the shattering was late coming to North America, and there was an empire called Tir na Nog that was by the Fae of the Americas. And it's like, is this the Nunehi? Which is the sort of indigenous America, or at least North American Fae? I don't know. It seemed like it was, but then didn't explicitly say that.
I think that readers are at an advantage if they have any kind of background in particularly Irish folklore. So Tir na Nog, for example, is the land of eternal youth in Irish myth. And if I recall my distant past readings correctly, it is kind of that, oh, it's somewhere over the sea to the west. And so that, because that's a common trope in like European mythology, I wonder if they just kind of took that and ran with that. In later books, we do get some much more problematic stuff that we'll have to talk about down the line in terms of pre-Age of Discovery, transoceanic contact, and the Fae. But that's a can of worms for another day.
The implication here is that, you had Fae all around the world.
Yeah.
But they called them Cathane, and they were just everywhere in the world, and it's just the ones who happened to be in Tir Nadog, when the Sundering sort of started spreading, they were insulated from it for a long time there, as opposed to, like, I don't know, fleeing it and going there.
Which is an idea that does pop up in later books as well, I think.
I don't know if there's other specifically history stuff you want to get into. I have a few more other things, but that's more like around the resurgence.
Well, I do have a resurgence comment to make. Yeah, between the Shattering and the Resurgence, we have a bit about the interregnum, which is when the commoners were essentially ruling themselves without contact with the Dreaming. Certainly without contact with Arcadia, and for the most part without contact with the Dreaming, since most of the Trods had closed up. And then they reopened. And the reason for that is in the history of World of Darkness, a convoluted one having to do with the moon.
Right, because we mentioned that in the previous episode about how the other things referred to Arcadia being, some other sources referred to Arcadia being on the moon. So when Buzz Aldrin and Neil Armstrong and I forget the guy who was left up in the capsule.
I know, everyone forgets him.
But those are the only two who actually stepped on the moon anyway. And there's people who flew around it beforehand. That and everyone viewing it or something about that event reopened all the glamour, and the She came rushing back. Although, if you look at David, so there's a High King David in the setting for Concordia. In this book it says Mexico, United States, and Canada is Concordia. But it talks about David's basically implying that he was an active changeling, like as a she, before the resurgence.
I'm looking at that piece trying to parse that.
Yeah, page 54. Because if you look at the timeline, born in upstate New York in the early 60s, he was, and first of all, in this book, the She are not possessing human bodies. They're the changelings that have replaced humans.
Right.
And it says he was born in the early 60s, and he was saned very young.
I suppose he could have been saned at the moment of the resurgence.
Yeah, or like right around it. But
that being said, so one of the features of the resurgence that sort of helps explain, and I believe they go into this down the line, that sort of helps explain the differing ages of the She in the intervening years, is the notion that time gets wonky on the road from Arcadia. So a She could leave Arcadia and take a month to get to the Autumn World, or it might take 20 years. So that's why there's She still awakening. So I guess it's not outside the realm of possibility that David woke up a little early somehow, which would be an interesting...
Yeah, he got there first. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, another thing that I did find just from like a setting thing is they talk about there are 13 noble houses in this book.
Yes.
They do not name them all, but that is something that they kept up. I think C20 did add a 14th house.
It did, yeah.
Yeah. But up until that point, there was 13 houses. So, and that's a thing they kept. They didn't really expand them until quite late in the line. So, like, name them even.
Well, and then the fact that it says the exile of 5 of the 13 noble houses implies only those 5 are on Earth. And yet we get the unseelie ones pretty soon thereafter, and then the lost ones much later.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they also in this sort of section talk about Seelie and Unseelie generally in balance and not really, and it's like not that huge conflict.
Which I like.
Yeah, it's just interesting also in the same book, it doesn't do that anymore.
Yeah. And we do get a lot of the same information that's in the introduction, just kind of not in character voice.
Yep. It says that Concordia is full of Fae from all over the world, so that's nice. And also the Ashit here is something of the Dreaming. It's not a thing created by Han King David for Concordia, which I think later is retconned, but...
I'll have to look into that.
Yeah, but I like that.
I also, on the facing page, so we have a list of types of freeholds, which, we get in other editions, but the concept of the Thorpe, which is the fairy town, it made me think a bit about changeling demographics. And I know demographics are sort of a contentious topic in the community, but this book is fairly quiet on the subject of how many changelings there are, except it seems to imply that there are a lot.
Yes.
I mean, they're having pitched battles during the Accordance War. There were enough of them to have entire towns. So I think it's reasonable to say they're probably the most common of the main splats. It's just that with their fairly quick active lifespan and turnover rate, it may kind of obscure how many there are at any given time.
Well, that's the interesting thing with changelings. You werewolves do awaken, and mages, you can argue about that. Changelings are not technically human for the entire time they're changelings, right? A lot of them are only active for a few years at most. And what they do mention in demographics here is about dreamers, not in this section, but in a much later section, but I think it's relevant to this, is that they're roughly 1 in 1,000 is a dreamer that you could get glamour from. So I don't know how to translate that into how many dreamers per Kithane is there to be sustainable, but
someone's going to have to do the math on that.
Yeah.
Anyway, we get about 12 pages on feudalism, which is exhausting, but I suppose it's good for people who aren't nerds about medieval government.
Well, I mean, it's also good for people who are nerds about medieval government, because they would not just assume it's real feudalism.
Yeah. It's interesting that, they really lean hard into the sort of courtly dynamic. It's something I have to get on my soapbox for just a minute here. The whole focus of the she in Changeling is something that's always kind of bugged me, not just from a metaplot point of view, but also from just the game experience point of view. And it actually, I think, bugs me more in 2nd edition, because in 1st edition, at least you have these sort of other subplots wound through. You have like Dr. Stark and his Dauntain, you have the Immortal Eyes, Oath Circle, all of this stuff. And by the time you get to 2nd edition, it's just all High King David's disappearance all the time. And that sort of forces you into this courtly politics kind of game, which I like courtly politics, but not just courtly politics.
But I think this book also does a lot of things of presenting the she as like presenting the anti-she commoners as the good guys.
That's true.
Like, it does have more of the, goth punk aesthetic from Vampire. Like, you're mostly playing, the commoners who are being oppressed by the she, although you can get into the other politics gay.
Yeah, and playing a commoner, I think, is out of fashion these days.
Well, I had the LARP background as well, so that in those you would get like, I don't know, if you had 30 players, you'd get like 5 she, and they'd go and do their politicking, and then it would spill over and cause like 5 player character she, and then like NPC powerful she, right? And then like they'd do their politicking, and then it would cause problems for the most of the other players. So that's, which I think kind of works. But
and the she are exceptionally fragile in this edition, which when we get to talking about the Kiths,
yes,
they are actually, there is a list here in the setting chapter where we can very briefly just kind of go through them, I suppose. So first we start with the Boggin. Boggins are quiet, practical homebodies, basically hobbits. Let's call them what they are. And they accomplish ordinary tasks at incredible speeds.
Yeah, they're hobbits plus the shoemaker elves.
Yeah.
You have the Ishu, which are sharp-witted and crafty, renowned travelers and storytellers, plagued with unquenchable wanderlust. They're always at the right place at the right time. They say they originated in Africa. They've since traveled the globe.
Then we've got the Knockers, who are grotesque and dour, but also renowned smiths and craft persons. They fix things and relate to machines better than people. They're also well known for cursing a lot.
Puka are scoundrels of the worst sort. Puka are clever and gregarious talkers. They're famous for never telling the complete truth. They're also all have an animal association. Doesn't mention it there. Seems a bit important.
All of that is slander and calumny, and I take great offense. Anyway, then we've got the Red Caps. Crude, rude louts with a taste for blood, disliked by most. They have voracious appetites and can pretty much literally eat anything.
We have satyrs that are lusty, hedonistic party animals, but paradoxically sought after for their wisdom. Their music can be quite infectious and been known to have powerful effects on its listeners. They're also all goat-like, with like horns and goat legs and stuff.
Yeah. Then the She are the nobles, very tall, very beautiful. They're natural born leaders and know it. So the Tolkien elves with sticks up their orifices.
Mm-hmm. The Slua, what are the whispers of secrets, the disturbing beings that dwell in the forgotten places of the world. They never speak above a whisper, and you have to listen carefully.
The creepy ones.
Yes.
And lastly, the Trolls, the huge, amazingly strong changelings known for their honor and stubbornness. Almost nothing can make a troll change its mind once it has been made up. And there's bits in the sort of in-game lore about how when the Shi were gone, the trolls sort of stepped into the role of being not rulers, but nobles. They were the examples of being chivalrous and honor-bound.
I think it was kind of a combo of trolls and a troll would find a boggin, and
right.
the boggin would organize everything, and the troll would stand there and threaten to hit people who didn't listen to the boggin. Thinks what it came down to.
The knight and his page, or seneschal, perhaps.
Mm-hmm.
What else? What else in this chapter? It is actually a very nice, densely written. It's dense without being too much. It treats almost everything you need briefly and succinctly, and that's great. One thing that I can't recall this actually popping up anywhere else, but we have this concept of the patronage and the cliques. I don't know. Do you recall this from anywhere else in the game? Because I don't.
I don't recall this from this chapter.
There you go. The mists have clouded this page.
Yes.
But so we have this notion of the cliques, which are groups of changelings that, get together and patronize arts or creativity of specific types. So you have the Epicureans who idolize the art of preparing and enjoying food, the Terpsichoreans who dedicate themselves to dance, the Groupies who appreciate rock and roll, the Zoetrope Society who look at films, etc., etc. And we do have hackers in here as well. So they patronize virtual artists or digital artists and programmers and hackers, which kind of is a nice, it's a slight hole in the general science is bad ethos of 90s White Wolf.
I didn't find a lot of science is bad in this book.
It's more like psychiatry is bad is what they go with. So.
Yes. One thing I caught too with Changeling Society that surprised me is, so talking about commoner society, so you have a household around a freehold, but the Motleys, I always thought of a motley as just like an oath circle for some reason, but no, this is like they're the anarchists who are opposed to the Chi.
Yeah, I suppose they shifted the meanings at some point, but
I like that. It's a group.
Well, because in the lexicon section it just says motley, a family or gang of commoners.
Yeah.
So I think of motley as the party, and that's
But now they talk about oath circle. The oath circles are the party. Really, is what it's supposed to be.
I suppose it's like a Venn diagram.
Yeah, Motley's as in the bigger Motley write-up, not in the lexicon. They're more presented as a motley controlling multiple freeholds in the like.
Traveling around like circus folk.
Some of them stay put. Too.
Some of them.
So I guess what they mean by gangs, they're talking about like the bigger gangs.
I think that's pretty much the whole chapter. We get a little bit about a little preview of the Nunahi nymphs and inanimate.
Yeah, it has the whole Seelie unseelie thing, which is the light fae and the dark fae.
And the Shadow Court, which is a little bit confusing because the unseelie are not the Shadow Court. Sometimes it seems to split 2 ways, sometimes 3 ways. Just have to roll with it.
Yeah, and that's a thing that continues all throughout the line.
Ultimately, it does seem that the game makes it very difficult to be truly independent as a changeling. It's not like the other games. Vampire, you can be an anarch or an autarchus. Werewolf, I suppose you can be Ronin or whatever. Mage can be an orphan or just any old mage who likes to hang out by themselves. But changelings...
They mention those, but they basically don't seem like playable characters.
Exactly, yeah. It's you're sort of obligated to be involved with a motley or a household of some kind.
Yeah, it seems like otherwise you become either go to the forgetting quickly, you fall into bedlam, or you become Dantean, I think is the...
Yeah. And they do list family as a theme, that notion of kinship, so...
Oh yeah, there's all the stuff on the calendar.
Got some festivals.
Oh yeah, rulers are appointed by lottery, the royal lottery. So it's like basically voting by the nobles, by the high up, by the dukes. And
I think I totally missed the lottery thing the first time I read through. It doesn't seem to make much sense.
No, that's how actually traditionally a lot of monarchs had been appointed. Like Up to like the Holy Roman Emperor was picked that way.
Okay, so if a title becomes vacant, I see.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's not like there's a term.
That makes more sense.
Because, I mean, patrilineal descent doesn't work so well with Changeling Society. You're like,
no.
It's like, oh, you had a puka kid.
I see no problems here.
Yes. Some she might. That's the...
Well.
I like the kin versus Canadian distinction. That's good, too. And autumn people. And, yeah. So, yeah, that's good for the setting. Next is storytelling.
It is wonderful that we get storytelling as chapter 3 rather than like chapter 9.
Yeah.
Usually it gets relegated to the back of the book.
Yep.
Right.
Like the first thing I noticed about that was nobody's expected to have a computer or any sort of anything like that.
Right.
Which makes sense. Like maybe you'd have a computer and printer, but how would that be helpful? Because it wouldn't help you get character sheets or anything, right? So
precisely. Got to photocopy them like a pleb. We do get the full list of themes here, which I like. So you have isolation and alienation, then family, romance, wonder, nightmares, freedom and wildness, madness, and humor. Humor's at the end. So take that, everyone who thinks Changeling's just a happy-go-lucky goof fest.
Although they do emphasize how much it should be a metaphor for childhood.
That's true.
But that includes like nightmares and
stuff. Childhood can be shit. I mean,
yeah, it's pretty scary. I don't want to do it again.
No, definitely not.
It's one thing to not grow up, because then you finally get childhood figured out. But, well, you're new to childhood? No, it's scary.
It is a very, I mean, in addition to being how to run a game, it's sort of like a paper on narrative theory. It's like the different types of conflict, themes and moods. And
then just a big dump of the hero's journey.
That's how you know you're in the 90s. Yeah, so the hero's journey, for anyone who isn't familiar, you have this 12-step process as they lay it out in Changeling. And I think it's also Joseph Campbell who calls it the monomyth and had argued it's sort of the core narrative of like all of the great stories around the world through history, which lots of people took issue with. But it was a very popular idea.
It's behind things like Star Wars.
Right. And Changeling, the dreaming, apparently. So
possibly the metaplot. I don't know. We should figure out. Do we want to figure out if the story presented in the back of the book follows the monomyth?
I'm sure at least one or two of the stages it does.
Yeah, but I don't think either of us are huge Campbell fans. So maybe.
Well, I like Campbell, but like many theorists who I enjoy, I try not to accept all his work as the be-all and end-all of the entirety of the human condition. And he's fun to read.
Yeah, it does say don't cling to the structure.
Good, yes.
So I think it's, if you have no idea what you're supposed to do, I mean, it's a place, you can make a story with it for sure.
Right, all of this is a foundation. This is something to build upon, not something to box yourself in with.
But I think I would also say you don't need to use it as the foundation necessarily, as much as they're implying.
I do feel like it is kind of like, again, this is how to tell a story if you're 12 years old. And that's not to cast aspersions on it, but it's simple enough to understand.
I'm not kind of sure what kind of 12-year-olds you know, but I think you might want to up the age a little bit. Like still teenager, yeah, but
as a 12-year-old, I would have wanted to tell Changeling stories.
Yes.
I mean, I was I guess 13 when I first found Changeling, so
yeah, I was still in my Rifts phase back then, so
yeah. Rifts, I don't think you could do the hero's journey with.
I mean, you could, but...
Well, in any case, we get a bunch of story hooks and chronicle concepts, and something I do like in this chapter also is that they specifically call out advanced techniques, which are very Changeling appropriate. So like how to story tell dreams or flashbacks or plays within plays. And having that, I think, is a nice way of complicating the narrative.
Yeah, the troop style play makes me think of, because one game I heard of a lot of that is Ars Magica. So that's going back to
how about that? Also on page 103, we do have, or what would changelings be like on Deep Space Nine? Could cyberpunk changelings overcome the banality inherent in turning themselves into metallic samurai? And this is the spinoff I need.
Yes.
This must happen. That photo in the introduction has got me thinking about it.
Another thing I've been wanting to do as a chronicle or book a crossover World of Darkness game set in, say, the modern day world of, the whatever 20 line stuff, but
Mm-hmm.
it's structurally just a game of Shadowrun.
I'm into it. Totally into it. Perfect. Let me know when that happens.
Yes. It's on the list of ideas that are there.
Nice.
No one feel bad about stealing it though, if you like that idea.
No, I've got enough theft on my plate. One other note on that same page is we have a dream speaker finds her way into the dreaming and encounters a group of changelings as a possible crossover story idea.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is the first salvo in the war of where's the dreaming located relative to the Umbra.
Yes.
This is something we'll have to bookmark for later.
Yes. Oh, when we get to Dreams and Nightmares, the book on the dreaming.
Yep.
I have a lot of things to say.
But anyway, I think that's pretty much everything for book one. And it's a very rich book one.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's my favorite book of the 3 books in this book.
I agree. I mean, it's got the most substance to it, and it's not just useful for Changeling. There's lots of great ideas for all games.
The most useful for Changeling now, I would say, too. Like, you take that chapter, very minor setting tweaks, and it's perfect for C20. A C20 game.
Yeah.
It's very useful.
And again, compared with the other lines that were around at the time, how refreshing it is to read all of that without like being interrupted by, here's all the splats within the game. And
yeah.
Here are disciplines.
Yeah, it does build you up to, now you are ready to start thinking about, rules.
Right.
Which leads us into Book 2, Wilder, Chapter 4, Rules.
Which is wonderfully short.
This is very first edition World of Darkness rules, yeah. I'd say. One thing I liked is that basically never make anything difficulty 2 or not. Do 2 or 10 if you can avoid it, which is useful advice because you really shouldn't. The game gets really weird at that point. And I don't remember seeing that everywhere else. The rules are kind of straightforward for that edition. I don't use that edition when I'm running games, but core rules they're not terrible.
Yeah, no, it's very straightforward, and we get some examples of roles. Weirdly, we get the sample character sheet before the character creation section. So
yes, or anything that's on the sheet. But yeah, you could start with a sheet and then start to.
In other games, in other World of Darkness games, you would get all of the character creation stuff before the rules. So you have already seen the character sheet.
Yes. So we have knocker page. I like that knocker page.
Huzzah!
I want a chimerical telephone. Why does the telephone? I just noticed. It's like a classic picture, shows up in other other Changeling books. Is that a telephone? Because it's got a little 2-pronged plug.
I think it's a knocker device.
Yes.
And therefore, who knows? I'd like to point out also that unlike a game like Vampire that uses lots of punk and rock lyrics for its sort of little epigraphs, we have John Keats' La Belle Dame de Sans Merci and other sort of classic poetry and folk music and whatnot for the chapter headings. So that's a nice touch.
Yes.
But yes, character.
So this I also like. It's more, there is some sort of mechanic-y, mathy bits in it, which are fairly straightforward, and I'm not sure if even the freebie point chart, I think the freebie chart might have changed by later editions, but it's not a big change. But the sort of advice, like talks about how you do character creation, and it's just flat out what it says. It's not giving alternatives. Is everyone shows up and they start working together on making characters. You're essentially doing a session 0. You're coming up with how everyone's tied together. You're coming up with shared themes. You're coming up with, like, you're doing your character together and riffing off each other.
Having reasons to be in the same party in the first place.
Yes. Why are you an Oath Circle if you're probably an Oath Circle? It does talk about like how most people don't have a mortal life, which is interesting later on the Bedlam rules, Bedlam guidelines, but the question and answers I like too.
Oh, at the end.
Yeah.
Where there's an entire set of questions just for your Oath Circle prelude. So.
Yep. Yeah, it's like you should answer this in your prelude.
I almost feel like there were 2 different authors writing this section and then one of the earlier sections, and one author was very convinced that all changelings needed to be in an Oath Circle.
But I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I think that is a good default.
No, not at all. It's just, it leans into the sort of epic approach to the game. Everyone has sworn an oath for whatever you're doing in the Chronicle.
Well, that doesn't have to be epic. It's everyone's sworn an oath to run this soup kitchen is...
Fair. Mythic, perhaps, rather than epic.
Yes.
Today, in important distinctions.
Yes, when you're going to be doing it's not just a bunch of friends who hang out together.
Again, fairly short, fairly straightforward. And then, we're getting to chapter 6, and we still have not seen a splat page, which is astonishing.
But I like that. I do like that red cap picture in chapter 5 and 6. I think that's my favorite red cap picture in Changeling.
He's just so grumpy.
He's a cuddly guy. You could just...
I like the body jewelry. Anyways, so we get to chapter 6, which is traits, and we start with seemings. So there's something, probably one of the biggest changes in C20 is untangling seeming from actual mortal age, because in these earlier editions, it's pretty, it's still not set in stone, but it says childlings are rarely over 12 years of age, wilders are typically between 13 and 25, and grumps are over 25.
Yeah.
I think later they also say most grumps only make it to like 35 or so.
Well, they say, get up to 40, that's impressive.
Yeah.
But as a 41-year-old, that's an interesting take on Changeling for me now at this point. But I think it's more, and it's very much like if you're a childling who's over 12, you're very immature, I think is the implication. Same as
yeah. And we also have the wildly different temper ratings for glamour, willpower, and banality, which, again, C20 evened out. Because essentially in this edition, childlings are batshit out of their minds, because you have glamour 5, willpower 1, banality 1. Wilders are sort of passionate, but with a bit of an edge, because they have glamour 4, banality 3. And then grumps are just the most miserable people on the planet.
Yeah. So. I can't remember in this edition when I got to the rules. I know second edition has this problem where the grumps, you actually can't really stay playable unless you've bought up some glamour with freebies or something.
Yeah, no, essentially, because as soon as your banality is higher than your glamour, you run into problems.
Yep.
So I don't mind that they readjusted that. It does change the dynamic of the game, but I think it's a fair change.
There's one thing that I was wondering about before we got to the kiths is there's a line in here somewhere. It says basically that young changelings often consider their mortal selves to be their true selves, and then older changelings consider the fey selves to be the true selves. And I'm like, is that the actual age? Or time as a changeling? What? And also, either way, a lot of grumps would be not thinking of the mortal world. Like that all just, it was a weird line. But
I suppose in a way, we could get into the theory of subjective perception of time and whatnot, but if someone who's a grump has been awake as a changeling for most of their life, and that's become sort of their default perception of themselves, whereas a childling has only recently awakened, and the whole experience of being Fae still kind of feels like the best game of make-believe ever. Maybe that's kind of part of it. It makes you wonder what wilders think.
Yes.
They're just a mess. They're just hormones and gumption. That's what they are.
Oh, that does fit the age range, kind of. Although, again, 13 to 25 is also... Those are wildly different characters. Like, you're 24 or you're 14. You're not the same person at all. So it's... Yeah, so then they get into the detailed kith descriptions.
Yes. With some cool art, I think.
So I had some notes on some of the kiths. For the we did the little intro thing, but some stuff that stuck out to me about Boggans, for instance, is they swear a lot when they're angry. I don't remember that as a stereotype for Boggans. They really hate debts of all kind and hate oaths. They avoid oaths, and they don't want to be in debt to anyone and don't want anyone to be in debt to them. Even the Unseelie or Seelie either will hate that. And I'm like, that is not those are not things I thought of as Boggan-like before.
Yeah. The refusal of oaths especially. That's surprising.
Yeah, not flat out refusal of oaths, but just rarely enter into oaths of any kind.
Yeah. Interesting. They also apparently hate issue, which,
Yeah, okay, those things, people talking about other things is like, you can tell somebody just made a Boggan, and then what the Boggan thinks about the other kiths. Like, It's not... I wouldn't take any of these as being completely... Because there's no way the Boggans would really like the Knockers that much.
But I do like... So in the Red Caps section, the Red Caps have maybe just one of the best single words in all of the lines, which is just their outlook on the Puka is rugs. Full stop. That is the Red Cap perspective on Puka. Rugs.
I mean, yeah, in later editions that shifts to dinner.
And that tells you all you need to know about red caps, really.
Yeah. So yeah, with the red caps, we'll talk about them. Like they are so hardcore, unseelie, try to murder the Seelie at every step. Is like I'm like, that's not what the earlier part said about the unseelie, the Seelie unseelie connection.
Yeah. They're the only Kith, and I didn't realize this, they're the only Kith without the cannot botch a whatever roll. So like
Mm.
they have their intimidation birthright, and in C20 they did add in you can't botch intimidation rolls, but here they can, which is interesting.
Yeah, I think it's second end they got rid of the botching thing with the knockers, but that's another. But yeah, I did have some things. I did find the Puka. So you're a bigger Puka fan than I am.
Guilty.
Like, I mean, I'm fine with them, but they're really into the trickster thing in this book, like in this write-up at least.
Yeah.
And like very into the like fish milk type. More so than some of the later stuff that tries to. I mean, it's still there in other editions and other write-ups of Puka, but it's just so everything's dripping about that in this one. And also, I'm a little bit confused how the lying thing fits with their outlook write-up of the other Kiths, because I'm like, how's that not the whole truth about, like, say what they think about Boggins?
Well, maybe they rolled a willpower roll and...
Yeah, there's a lot of that.
Yeah, I think it's still fine. I mean,
Yes. Yeah, I know, it's also hard to do that.
When we get to Kithbook Puka, it's gonna be an effort to maintain my. But anyway,
there's a little line. Okay, so like on one for the satyrs for their physical prowess, I couldn't figure what the rules was referring to. I was looking for it later. Satyrs in their Kith goat-legged form can also run 20. I'm like, what is this human versus satyr form thing?
Well, I suppose it's just that they run faster if they've called upon the weird or if they're in chimerical.
But this book doesn't have calling upon the weird.
That's true.
We'll get into that later.
They were thinking ahead.
Yeah, and it's so there's an interesting. Maybe I missed it, and that's quite possible. I did not, and I definitely haven't run games using this and going in depth. But and I'm not even like complaining about it. Oh, the Slua. There's something really. Oh yeah, the Sheer hurt way more by banality.
Yeah,
than later things.
Yeah, definitely. Again, something that I had missed until going back and rereading this is the piece where its banality affects them as if it were 1 point higher than it actually is, which means they get double banality more frequently. So.
Yes, and all sorts of other effects on that. Yeah, flipping legacies, that's been around other places, but there's something interesting about the Slua. Besides the fact that, like, all the I was saying before, if you look at the Boggins slightly overweight, maybe, and then everyone else is very skinny in the art. Well, it's hard to tell with the satyr, but
the Slua is probably like 20 kilos soaking wet.
Yeah. Later editions also allow for the bloated corpse look for Sluas, but
that's very fashion.
But there's one very interesting thing that's not in the Slua write-up here, and I didn't see anywhere else. Although maybe it's in a later part. And I'm wondering if you can guess what it is.
Is it the ghosts?
Yes. Nothing to do with ghosts.
I believe the Kith book is where that's first mentioned.
Okay.
I think. It's either the Kith book or the Book of Lost Dreams or the Player's... Like one of the crossover-y parts. I'm sure we'll come across it eventually.
Because that becomes such a part of the Kith later that I found that interesting.
Yeah.
Do you have anything else about the Kith? Yeah, like houses. A lot of this was pretty much like in other editions for the most part. There's a thing that I've maybe shown up in other parts. House, I always say Gwydion. I'm just going to say anything in this book the way I always say it.
That's fine.
And it talks about how the founder, like Lord Gwydion, remained behind after the shattering and was around for a very long time. So it's like, did he take the Changeling away or what? Yeah, so he was around for Napoleon, like he was friend of Napoleon.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Also, I found the Gwydion also that they flip into rage when they're hurt too. I don't remember that being in later editions.
With House Liam, because those are the ones who I think of as, they're the ones, some of whom stayed behind on Earth, and we don't see any evidence of that here. Whereas Gwydion, it says, Gwydion himself stayed behind.
Yes.
So I wonder if they just kind of carefully switched that.
Well, the Gwydion, I think the Liam staying behind was a C20 change. I don't remember it being like there's throughout the books. There's talk about various house like members of all the houses. They've had a few people who've been around during the
Sure.
interregnum, but yeah, House Liam being a big one that stayed behind. I think that was a C20 innovation.
I'll have to check the 2e core book.
Yes, but they're not oath breakers in this.
Well, and in C20 they also introduce Autumn She as an entire splat. So the idea that some measure of all the houses or most of the houses stayed behind.
Sir, they are considered oath broken, but they don't talk about them breaking any oaths. They just aren't disliked.
Well, that happens. After that, we get some legacies, some of the worst art in the book. Sorry, apologies to... I won't name names when it comes to the art that I dislike, because art is difficult and people shouldn't be put down for their art, but there's some weird-ass art in this chapter, is all I'm saying.
I mean, some of the art I like. Not all of it is terrible, in my opinion.
But some of it is.
Yes. Yeah, the legacies have every Changeling core book, every tabletop Changeling core book. I do not like the legacies because they do too much to make Seelie good, Unseelie bad. And even though other places they don't really have that, this is like really enforced, and I don't.
There's a few which I think are maybe less problematic than others. But yeah, certainly in this initial batch before we get to the ones from the player's guide.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also, unlike games with nature and demeanor, where one is always on the surface and one is always underneath, the implication in Changeling is that you do switch legacies pretty frequently. And your affiliation with a court, that may determine which one you have active most often. But, you are always both Seelie and Unseelie.
Yes, but what I mean is, if you look at the descriptions of the courts as political entities, or the codes, because earlier the Seelie court has a code and the Unseelie court has a code, right?
Honor is a lie.
Yeah, I don't think those really match up well with the legacies, but
yeah, perhaps not.
It's a little sticking point I've had with. Because there's that player's guide. The LARP books also have the same sort of stuff the player's guide does. So and then we get, the legacies just cover how you regain willpower, basically. And then there's like a quest. The Ring of Willpower ban is just a thing you should avoid, but it's not really any teeth to it.
The nature demeanor analog.
Yes. And then we get to attributes. What you're physically good at, socially good at, mentally good at. Oh, there's hard rules for appearance. Like, appearance does something mechanically in this. I'm not saying that's good, but it's a cap for certain types of die rolls. It's a cap on how many successes you can get.
Yes. Well, I think appearance needs to have some defense, because I know people throw it out and say it's the worst stat and do all homebrew sorts of stuff to get rid of it. But I like using appearance in active ways.
Yeah,
and
it's in it, and I mean, when you're having the she,
exactly,
you need it, right, mechanically. But in some other editions, in some other books of other games, appearance does have the problem of not doing anything mechanically. So I think it does need mechanical, and it can get specialties, and there's still no rules for when you'd actually roll it here. But
well, that being said, the description does also have the unenviable phrase, making it impossible for an ugly person to achieve anything beyond minimal success, which is pretty dismal.
Yes.
We'll overlook that. It's a game. So then we get some abilities.
Yeah.
I do like how, in the sort of ongoing debate about whether secondary abilities should be ditched or not, we have like the list of talents, and then it just says other talents at the end and says instruction, intrigue, search, seduction. So it's allowing for the possibility that people who have played other World of Darkness games may want to bring in secondary abilities, but just kind of leaves them to the side.
Well, another thing that's playing into crossover debates is, in this book, kenning is not the same as the awareness ability at all.
Right.
It's only Changeling stuff. But in C20, for instance, it is just the awareness ability.
Yep.
Which is why you can get into arguments. If you get into arguments on the internet, you should clarify which editions. We were talking about the abilities. So there's a few things that another one is, there's some name rearrangements that's done after this. So you have Myth Lore, which is what I'd think of as Grey Mare, or Grey Mare. And then Grey Mare In this
which
one
is
is
remembrance.
what I'd call past lives. Or remembrance. There we go. Remembrance, not past
Yeah.
lives.
None of that werewolf talk. That's werewolf, right? Past lives?
Yeah, maybe. Or is it mage?
Oh, who knows?
Yeah.
It's remembrance here. Well, it's
Yes,
not
remembrance.
remembrance here, but in the future, it will be
Yeah.
remembrance. We also have chimerical items are under treasures rather than associated with companions.
And treasure just is like minor, useful, significant, powerful, and incredible power. And when we do get to the treasure section, you'll see how that can be a bit confusing.
Indeed. And then we have tempers, glamour, willpower, and banality, and health.
Yeah, so you can lose. I don't remember this being a later rule. You can lose. You can sacrifice a permanent to fill up your temporary.
I remember that being a thing for glamour. I don't remember that being a thing for willpower, and I don't remember it being a thing in any of the other games.
Yes, I mean technically, if you want to really, really rules lawyer, because that's the best way to play Changeling, you could do that with banality too. But
right. Well, and banality is also the only one that turns from 10 temporary into a permanent. So
I guess it immediately shifts back again if you follow. You can. Oh yeah, willpower regaining. There's an interesting complication here. So in all the World of Darkness games, including Changeling, you get a good night's sleep, you can regain willpower. Except for this book, where you can only do that if you're in your mortal seeming and in the mundane world. So if you're sleeping in a freehold or whatever, or in the dreaming, you don't get your willpower back.
Which is important. I'd also like to note that one of the uses for glamour is that you can spend 1 point to place an additional bunk card on a cantrip.
Yes. For all you Changeling fans who've never read first edition, you're going, what?
We're getting there. We're almost there.
Yeah.
Anything else for chapter 6/book 2, Wilder?
No.
The meaty book.
So book 3, Grump, chapter 7, Glamour.
Did you ever see Party Monster, the film, where they have the song Money, Success, Fame, Glamour? That's what I think of.
No.
Anyway, something that I was specifically looking for when I started reading this was any kind of reference to the concept of, quote, dark glamour. And now dark glamour is officially a thing in C20, but when people say, oh, glamour used to just all be bright and happy and it should have had darkness and whatever, it really strikes me as sort of amoral in this edition.
Yes.
All of the ways that they describe it, they're very sensory and not very associated with particular acts or particular attitudes.
Yes.
So given what you were saying about how the Unseelie legacies by and large are kind of, awful people, it would stand to reason that glamour that they're associated with is going to be equally filled with rage or filled with terror or filled with melancholy or any of these other things.
So glamour, the first paragraph is about the best you could start. The living font of all spiritual energy, glamour flows from the dreaming to the earth. Indeed, glamour is concentrated dreams comprising magic, life, and beauty. Its truth is hard to fathom, perhaps impossible. The wisest changelings have spent lifetimes studying it, trying to understand it, yet it remains a mystery. And it's what changelings are, it's what makes changelings, really. And it's magic, fairy magic.
It sustains them.
Yes, and it comes from the dreaming flowing to earth. And that's why humans are creative, because they tap into the glamour of the dreaming, according to this chapter.
I think of it like a give and take relationship, a cycle.
Oh yeah, this is not a thing that's been consistent throughout Changeling, but I just found it interesting in this part.
Yeah.
It's so very just, that's what glamour is. We don't know a lot about it, but we know that about it.
But we also have storytelling glamour sidebar where they say, when describe glamour, appeal to all 5 senses. It feels warm, hot, cold, soft, silky. It smells like rose petals, dark musk, patchouli oil, sweet clover, a midnight breeze. It tastes like honey and wine. It looks like a rainbow caught in a tie-dye factory, which is a great image, I have to say, and so forth. So having that, it's raw experience when you describe it or encounter it. And it's interesting how it very specifically does not say it's evil, it's good, We get a little bit of that when it talks about Epiphany and how changelings get glamour by either ravaging mortals or mortal dreamers or using reverie to inspire them or rapture to just do something themselves.
Yes, and it doesn't really talk about, say, freeholds, which would also be another method. But yeah, so ravaging, you use banality to rip the glamour out of someone. It's not a pleasant experience for them, and has the
No.
potential of gaining you banality.
Yes.
Reverie, which I always just think of muses because I can't remember which one reverie is supposed to be.
Hmm.
It's the actually, yeah. Sorry, how would you describe reverie? I guess, or ravaging.
Reverie is like you get to meet a painter and you become a painter's model, and through modeling for that painter, you get that, painter full of glamour, which you then absorb some of. That's reverie to me. Building the relationship and having this mutually beneficial art creation kind of thing, or dream creation,
Yes.
because not all dreamers need to be artists. And then Rapture is the changeling essentially inspiring themselves because they have a fey side and a mortal side.
And it's not easy at all to do.
It is not, but it's super powerful if you do it right.
Mm-hmm.
I think the only way besides spending experience to get permanent glamour.
Yes. Oh, yeah. They do mention, by the way, you can only use Ravaging and Reverie on a Dreamer. And it says it's about 1 in 1,000 are Dreamers. So they're not common at all, but Changelings can sense them anyway with kenning and whatnot. Which I always think is fun. It's like you're walking down the street, you're like, huh, that person's interesting. And it might not look at all different on the outside.
Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's just the vibe.
Or the tie-dye smell.
Something.
Yes. And then there's also Dross, which is glamour in physical form, which is a bunch of different kinds. Some is glamour formed into objects. Some is like chimera, so like things made out of glamour. Some is like pieces of art, changeling treasures, yeah, that kind of thing. But most of those you can't refresh your own glamour pool from. It's just you use it and spend it right away for something else. And it keeps talking about using it as money, and I'm like, that's not what money is. Anyway.
Right. People seem to have wildly different opinions on how much dross is floating out there, because that money thing, using it as currency, implies that everyone has a pocket full of dross, which doesn't really track for me. I guess if someone wants to run a high glamour game, it's fine, but I think it's better when it's a more precious commodity that fits more with the themes of the game to me.
Yeah, I've always had it as more precious as well. Yeah, and there's the laws of glamour. This is stuff I don't think of as glamour at all. You can never replace truth, so you can't make a perfect copy with it. I mean, it's interesting. It's just never.
Some of it works its way into the later stuff, I think.
Yeah.
Like chimerical food not being nourishing. It might taste good, but it doesn't fill you up.
Yep. That makes staying in the dreaming for an extended period of time very fun.
Yeah. I'm looking at the next page, and I'm looking at the C word.
Cantrips.
Oh boy, here we go. I think
this is the most notorious part of this edition.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. Just for context, I think we need to explain, to the young folks. So back in 1993, there was this game that came out called Magic the Gathering. Some of you may have heard of it. And I don't think it's a far cry to say that it really revolutionized the gaming landscape, in the sense that suddenly everyone was playing collectible card games. Every company under the sun was creating a collectible card game. Like, there were hundreds at the time that Changeling came out, just floating around.
There was even another Changeling collectible card game.
Yeah. Well, I'd like to think they started that after they started the books, but who knows? So yeah, so it was a craze, and it's a craze that has abided to the present day to some extent. And my feeling is just, someone at the White Wolf office has said, we should get in on this. Let's stick some collectible cards into Changeling.
I heard a rumor it was from their distributor, but I can't remember where I heard that rumor from, so I don't know how much we should trust it. But somebody somewhere said, oh yeah, the distributor made him do it.
I'd believe it. I would absolutely believe it, because it's solely a cash grab. I mean, as with any sort of collectible commodity.
Yes.
But making one fundamental to the playing of the role-playing game is what I find so egregious. And granted, they did very quickly, even in the core book, they kind of give an alternate system and then quickly dropped the cards in favor of the alternate system.
Yes.
But just the fact that the cards were sort of in the mix from the start is like, come on.
But it does. Yeah, okay. So there's 4 types of cards. They list 3 here, and then they list another one later, because that's also helpful. So you have art cards, realm cards, bunk cards, and nightmare cards.
Yeah.
So in Changeling, mechanically. Even though you have the cards, you still have to purchase your arts and realms. And your art is sort of what magical effect you have, and the realm is what you do it to. But actually, you seem to have a better handle on this system than I do.
It's an angry handle off of which I might fly, but
yes,
I'll try.
Go for it.
Well, so yes, essentially every art, because there are 6 arts divided into 5 powers, and each of those has its own card. Similarly, there are 5 realms, which we'll get to that later, each of which has 5 ranks of its own, so there are individual cards for each of those. What I've always wondered is, what was the distribution of cards in the actual packs that you could buy at the store? Because if you have to use the cards to do cantrips, doesn't that mean you have to have those dots on your character sheet, you know?
Yeah.
So that's one
you
hurdle.
have to buy it and you have to pay for the experience.
And they have to match.
Although they also have later in the PDF, it's at least in the PDF on page 288.
Is it the make your own thing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you just make your own.
Yeah.
So really, really not. It's like somebody was sticking to the technicality of what they had to do.
Yeah.
Not wanting to actually promote this collectible card game.
In any case, so we're already at a disadvantage here. But when you want to cast a cantrip, you have all your arts and realms in your hand of cards. You take the art and the realm that you want to use. You can combine realms to do a greater sphere of influence, but you have to pay glamour for additional realms. And then you have a deck of bunks, which I believe are random, and you draw a random bunk, and you then have to perform the action. The bunks are, range from graffiti.
There's something about eating a sandwich or something in one call.
Yeah. You can spend a glamour to draw an additional bunk. And then once you perform the bunks also have levels, and the greater level of the bunk, the more effective the magic is. You also have to overcome the target's banality, which has stayed into future editions. And then once the cantrip has ended, successfully or not, you take the cards back into your hand, except for one card of your choice, which is immediately discarded.
Yes.
Unless you spent a point of glamour. If it's not clear yet, this was a very confusing system for people to try to follow.
Yeah, and you're like, oh, I just discarded my art of that level, so I guess I can't do that. And when do you refresh?
After a deep, satisfying, and prolonged rest, such as between stories. Also,
fun.
Reverie or Rapture can refresh a number of cards equal to the number of glamour points gained. So yeah.
And then there's the advanced cantrip casting.
Let's just skip over that. Let's just keep going.
Yeah, well, it means you can team up with each other, and then immediately they have the alternative dice system, so you don't have to use cards.
Although with the advanced methods, it does explain how you get nightmare cards.
Yes.
Which is essentially when you're about to gain temporary banality, you can instead put a nightmare card into your bunk deck, and then when you reveal it, you have a nightmare of some sort. So
yes. And now, if you decided let's not use the cards, and you're just because you're still rolling dice too on top of all this, right? And just roll the dice. You're still doing things like, so every art has a attribute associated. So like chicanery has manipulation. Well, you said there was 6?
6 arts, 5 realms.
So there's 3 attributes that don't have an art. Okay, and
the core book, yeah. So
it's like chicanery, and then the realm determines also what ability you're rolling.
In a way, they've aligned it with like Vampire, where each separate discipline power has its own, or most of them have an attribute plus ability combination, except it's a lot more remixable with arts and realms.
Do you have any particular arts you want to highlight in here?
Not arts as a whole, just some of the changes that they've made between, first and second are the ones that stand out to me, and then to C20 as well. Things like, as a brief rundown, we have chicanery, which is the art of sort of illusion and emotional manipulation. Legerdemain, which is illusions and sleight of hand. You have primal, which is nature, natural power, shape-shifting, stuff like that. Susei is understanding the nature of glamour and the forces of fate. Sovereign is the noble art of commanding people, and Wayfarer moves things very quickly. So primal, for example, in second edition, which was my first experience, the healing magic, and there's Heather Bomb and Holly Strike. So healing and harming. And those are both level 4, which always seems strange to me because they talk about the healing magics of the Fae all the time. And getting to Primal 4 isn't that easy. So in first edition, healing is at Primal 2. It's its own power. So it makes a little more sense when you look at first edition. Or things like Soothsay, they kind of moved the powers around. Chicanery, they switched a couple things. So the arts as a whole stayed the same, but the individual powers have shifted from edition to edition.
The realms, oh, I forgot about this. Each level of each realm. So like Actor 1 is empathy. Actor 2 is streetwise, because your personal contacts use streetwise for.
Which I suppose it's meant to encourage well-rounded characters, but it just doesn't work.
Yes. And so, like you said, there's 5 realms. People know in the later editions there's 6, and two of them are special. Here, there's 5 realms, and they're all very similar, which means there's the scene realm. So the other realms, besides having the ability thing, are very similar to later editions. The scene realm is not a modifier realm. It's what, except for sometimes it is, it's what you're actually targeting with your roll. But like, for instance, hopscotch, it doesn't do what I thought it did before. So it doesn't let you make a buildings, instead of buildings hop. But it does, it describes where you are leaping.
Yeah. You target an area. Yeah, it doesn't, I think that's why they changed scene, because it doesn't always work out.
Yeah, you're using wits plus politics to make a housing block have no gravity.
Sure. Yeah, Wayfair 4 Scene 5 makes perfect sense. But you need to have those cards in your hand and then do the appropriate bunk that you randomly draw from your deck.
Yes, so you might be blowing a bubble on bubblegum. I remember that's another one.
Is everyone still with us on the cantrip system? Because I'm not sure that I am.
But you can get 2 bunks.
Yeah.
If you spend glamour, then you do 2 things, and you're even better at making everything float with your politics roll, wits plus politics roll.
And we do get a full list of the bunks after the arts and realms, so you don't really need the cards even. It's all listed right there.
Yes.
Along with the nightmares.
Yeah. Well, and they have the little template where you can just photocopy and print out your own cards.
It is interesting, though, that in addition to the level of bunk, you also get variable numbers of successes from it, which I suppose is part of why you would want to, when you're drawing the cards randomly, if you have something that comes up, it's a level 1 bunk, but it gives you 3 successes. That's pretty awesome. So, because it's not difficulty manipulation, it's successes.
Yeah. I mean, difficulty manipulation has its own issues later in other editions, but
anyway, that's cantrips. We should probably talk about it more when we get to the player's kit, where they add more cantrip rules.
And the nightmares.
And the nightmares.
You get basically curses, like all your temporary glamour is gone, or the cantrip you cast just reverses itself, or
botch your next roll.
Yeah. It's like, cool, but I can sort of see it. That is hard. Some of this, the bunks and nightmares are hard to replace, though, as is. I can see, like, if you were just trying to use this book and not use the cards, you'd be like,
right.
What is this? Yeah. But that's enough of the really silly cantrip rules.
Anyway, treasures.
So yeah, there's different categories of treasures, and I don't remember seeing this. I think gets dropped by 2nd edition, but you have chimera,
which are just chimerical items later.
Pricks.
So.
Yeah, you have pricks, which can store. You basically get a little box that you stick your glamour cards into.
Right.
Noble treasures, which I don't know why that's a separate category. It just tells who uses them. Some talismans, which are what treasures are in 2nd edition. And then legendary treasures.
I think with noble treasures, it's when they're talking about things like the ducal sword or the ducal seal or the king's whatever. So they're associated with a title.
Or the little pendant thing. Yeah. So there's a bunch of little treasures here. They are neat and evocative. I would have liked more rules for them, maybe, if that's not too knocker or banal.
I kind of like it. I don't know. I like it. Because it's before they decided to make a rigorous system about, like, use an art to represent the treasure's power.
Yeah.
It was just, let's make some items.
Oh, no, I think that's too restrictive. But, like, I would have liked, I don't know what the treasure rating is to get it.
That's fair.
Or maybe, and there's some things in here where you're like, I can see needing to roll dice. Maybe it could tell us what dice to roll.
Well, would you perhaps like to share your favorite treasure from the list of treasures?
Yes. My favorite, there's a lot of neat treasures in here, but my favorite would be Baldaz's Ever-Folding Box. It's a cardboard carton, and you can manipulate it by flipping around to matchbox to carton size. which I think they're talking about cigarette cartons.
Oh, I thought it meant like
Not
a
sure.
much larger.
Maybe, yeah. I don't know what a carton is in that. Anyway, no matter how much, it always is weightless. You can't do it while anybody's around. Oh, if you place something in it, it's a normal weight. And then you can refold it and to hide things, and you have to unfold it. You do a complicated folding arrangement, and someone else has to unfold it.
It's basically an origami.
Yeah, origami cardboard box of holding.
Origami box of holding. There you go.
Yes. I'd love it, except for I would lose so many things in that and couldn't remember the exact pattern to get it back again or screw it up.
You just keep trying and you find things that previous owners have left in there.
Yes. Yeah, it just seems fun. It's one of those like I want this in a Changeling game, I think, or Mage game, or Nobilis game, or Exalted game. I'd want it in a game with magical stuff.
I'm going to go with the Orb of Ebullion, which is essentially a disco ball that emits an aura of euphoria. And very simple, very straightforward, but that's my style. You know, compulsory dancing. And there is actually a treasure card analogous to the cantrip cards depicted here with a groovy satyr dancing under the Orb of Ebullion.
Are they did they actually have treasure cards, or is that just like a...
It's an excellent question. I assume from this that they did, but I haven't seen one before, so.
Glamour. And next would be systems.
Which is, again, very, very straightforward and similar to the other World of Darkness games to an extent, at least at the start. I mean, going through experience points, how to get them, how to spend them.
It has an interesting thing where if you have a mentor background, you get discounts. I think that was in other early edition games. I know some version of Mage has that, or maybe the mentor or library in some version of Mage.
It makes the experience costs less onerous, definitely. I mean, these are deep discounts. So, for example, a character with 4 dots in mentor can roll 4 dice, difficulty 6. Each success subtracts 1 from the experience cost to learn an art or realm.
Yes.
That's hefty. I mean, that can be a whole level right there. And then the main system that we get first is Bedlam.
You call it a system. I think that's a strong word for it.
Well, it's not a dice-based system, but they do... I mean, they have the warning signs checklist, and they have sort of different effects at the different thresholds. They also name drop the Cup of Dreams for the first time, which is one of those weird metaplot things that, like, it occasionally pops up, but you really have no idea what it is until in C20 we got the 4th Immortalized novel, which was about the Cup of Dreams. So
Bedlam's so punishing, and it's so arbitrary on the storyteller side. I've had trouble with it. Well, the second edition had a very similar system, and I've always had trouble with that. I think C20's become not punishing enough, but at least I don't feel like, oh yeah, your character's screwed.
Yeah. I have to imagine there was
arbitrarily
there must have been some focus group discussion where people said, we're tired of paying so much attention to maintaining the balance between glamour and banality. And so they just defanged both of them to some extent.
Yeah. Like but banality at least still, like, C20 has a system for it. Bedlam,
right?
It's nothing like, I would have liked a system that kind of employs some things on this warning side checklist, even if it's a bit defanged, right? But it's like, oh yeah, I'm just going to go party it off in the dreaming and do all the things on this list, and nothing counts.
Yeah. A middle ground would be nice. Anyway, after that, Courtly Love, which I always think of as, like, you know, the band Hole whenever I hear about it. Excellent. The art on these pages, it's like we have... The way I would describe this, we have one piece of art where it's Zorro, but his head is a cube, and he's about to suck the life out of a she-maiden. And then on the other page, we have Satyr orgy about to begin.
Well...
Satyr and she, perhaps. Yeah.
There's nothing implying an orgy in that picture,
That's fair. Well, someone's painting it. So.
I guess maybe they're looking at somebody, maybe. Could be a threesome. Yes.
Curious art choices.
So yeah, it's all... The laws of love is like, what is that even about?
And Noble's the Shining Host leans hard into that. But we'll get to that eventually.
Yeah.
We've also got a number of oaths.
I love oaths in Changeling. I think
especially when they have a nice little benefit, a nice little glamour bump.
And that's in the LARP especially, like, oaths are like so core mechanic.
We've got a section on the mists, including the mists chart. I stopped to think about the mechanics of the mist comas, and I was just thinking, if you think about, how frequently people must get enchanted, how frequently that must lead to them encountering chimerical stuff that knocks them out or whatever, there must be a lot of people falling into inexplicable comas around the world of darkness.
Yes. So the mists for people, by the way, it's basically a side effect of banality. Later editions talk more about it as being actually maybe of the dreaming, but it's essentially the more banal you are, the less you remember of changeling stuff, including being enchanted. Actually, in this, all changeling stuff is enchanted.
Yeah.
This book.
Yeah. And you lose your memories or fall into a coma when you come back out of the dreaming or out of glamour space into the autumn world. So we have that. We have a section on enchantment and what that entails for mortals. And then we get Chimera.
This is the fun part.
It really is.
So you have Chimera are just, things formed of dreams.
Dreams come to life.
So you have chimerical animals, chimerical items, chimerical people, chimerical carpets, chimerical giant castles, chimerical islands are described at one part.
Chimerical baklava.
Yes, but that's not very filling. Actually, that is kind of baklava. It tastes nice, but I wouldn't have it as a meal.
Probably super tasty, though.
Yes. But yeah, there's chimerical monsters. You can go around fighting things and all sorts of stuff, and mortals don't really notice or see them. So you can... That's another problem, I guess, with being a 40-year-old grump is, oh no, I need to fight this monster, and I'm just sort of standing there like swinging my fake sword around, and people might take issue with that.
But you just enchant them, and then if the monster eats them, they'll be in a coma for
but if I'm doing it on like a busy street or something, or just out by a street where a lot of people can see, that gets difficult.
I fail to see the problem.
Yes. Oh, they have banality resistance rules. That I don't remember seeing in later editions. I can't remember how to pronounce this. Seokshin?
Shichon, I believe, is the proper Irish pronunciation, which means peace, or the peaceful ones, or something.
And we actually declared as being real.
Yeah.
Just 100% there. Given examples of a few.
Named examples.
Yes.
Specifics, which they very much walked back in second edition, and then kind of walked back the other way in C20. So,
and at least one of them's not very nice. But
yeah. So Lord Yarbonel rules a kingdom of Chimera on a fairy isle hidden somewhere in the Caribbean, and he's the most arrogant and haughty of the Kithane. And that I am curious why he has never appeared again.
So yeah, these are people who've managed, changelings who managed to find the balance between banality and glamour, and they become immortal as a result. Yeah. So it's the Golconda, or kind of the oracles.
Yeah.
And then we get into like the actual damage mechanics and injury, which the interesting thing here is there's no aggravated damage. There's real damage and there's chimerical damage, and that's it.
Beautiful. And cold iron is given some attention as well.
Yeah, it's a special kind of both damage.
It might be like the shortest health and healing section in all of the books. There's nothing about temperature or electricity or any of these other things that you often see. So.
Oh, and this one, cold iron is pure iron, not steel or any other sort of alloy, which has its own problems. Every definition of cold iron has problems, but
we'll have to do a mini-sode on that because I have thoughts and feelings.
Yes. Well, I have like what I'd like it to be, and then I have what the books say it is, and they're not really the same.
And there the twain shall meet. Anyway, anything else for Chapter 8, or shall we move on to the...
No, Chapter 9. It is a little... I do have a little bit of a naming issue, because this is systems, and then we have drama, which is just more detailed systems.
Right. This is... And even dramatic systems in the drama chapter takes up a lot of it. But we get sort of the explanation of things like scenes, turns, initiative, all of the things you'll need to run the extremely complicated WoD combat system.
Yep. Although it's less complicated in this version. I'm not saying it's better. It's just less complicated.
Well, and I understand. I mean, when I first encountered it in Vampire, it made sense to think, oh, sure, the person who gets the highest initiative should go last so that they can react best to what's going on around them.
But I don't think that's what they have in this book.
It's not. So,
Yep.
but it's along those lines. So
Yep. Yeah, you just split your die pool. It just means pick your lowest of the applicable thing and just split it.
right. Well, no, I'm sorry. So I'm remembering now. It's yes. I looked on 252. The winner declares her action last, but performs it first, which makes more sense. It's still really confusing, but it makes sense.
Mm-hmm. I don't remember that in here. Oh, there's freeform. I'm a little bit confused what the freeform combat optional is actually different from how it's different from the earlier stuff.
I just wing it whenever I do combat. To be honest.
Yeah. Oh, I'm only paying attention to this for this episode of the podcast.
Yeah. No. Exactly.
I am not trusting that this is like deeply play tested and like
right.
I should just. Yeah.
And especially things in the World of Darkness books, things like the firearms charts are always kind of confusing and full of holes, and they've left things out and made contradictions.
Yeah.
And it never bothers me because I never look at them because I never run Boondock Saints firefights.
And to be fair, like it's not like the World of Darkness books were particularly unusual of the time, like of this era.
Sure.
For that, for other role-playing games.
I mean, I was playing D&D 2nd edition at the time, and we had Thaco. So
I can't even tell if anyway, that's a total digression. I can't tell if 3rd edition actually got rid of Thaco or just changed the names of things. I still have not been able to work that out.
Probably the latter. Anyway, yeah, I don't have much to say on Chapter 9. We just we have a bunch of systems, and then we have more on the combat systems. Maybe the one thing that stands out is that one of the mental systems that's listed is dream interpretation, and it's sort of highlighted as something especially valuable for changelings. So I kind of like that that's in there. There's also seduction and sneaking and credibility and other stuff, but things that matter to the Kithane. Oh, and we do get the nice little example of play. I say nice, it's actually kind of weird. But,
that art, like you've complained about, you talk about you don't like the art and other things, and I don't like the art here, but everything about the art and layout just looks like it's a different book too.
Yeah. Well, there's a neat sort of stained glass effect, but it's very sort of flat, and the eyes are scary.
Really hard to read the text.
Also that. But it's good to have the examples of how combat actually runs.
And I do like after that the Swan Maiden She, mechanical Swan Maiden She, after at the end of the chapter.
She's on the cover of Nobles the Shining Host. She's the sort of other she.
I'm trying to figure what's going on with her dress.
She's Dougal.
Is she a Dougal? Okay. So she's apparently replacing some issue with her legs with a griffin thing?
Perhaps. With a beetle emblem.
I'm not sure if that's actually part of the picture, diegetic, or if it's like...
Either way. It could go either way.
Yes. Okay. And then we're on to 261, the appendix. The Fomori.
Right. Not the Fomorians, but the Fomori, who are, clearly the werewolf ones ported in.
Yeah. So these are corrupted, but I think it's like they got the Fomorians from this write-up.
Basically, yeah. Yeah.
Including the ignoring banality. And completely immune to glamour. What is that supposed to mean if you're using this as antagonists? Does that mean like arts don't work on them? Or just they don't feel creative?
Do you know, it's one of those things where I guess they felt like they should stick it in and then realized after the fact they had to create rules and meta plot around it. So maybe we should just treat this as a one-off thing and use the werewolf book instead.
Yes. You have Orphan Chimera, which we had earlier stuff about them, but I guess we get more rules here and stuff, more detail.
Well, and we have powers, which eventually became reeds. So the different sort of little charms that Chimera have.
Which I think is honestly like, yeah, okay, maybe I'm a rules person, but like this, I think this is the extent of the rules I need. Because unless you're doing character creation, I don't know. I think it's fine to not have to use a point system to make your NPCs. But yes, this cool little evocative. The Black Dog, and it doesn't actually run a role-playing game company.
Well, thank goodness for that.
And they have Nevers. Hey, they weren't made up for the Knocker Kith book.
The Tinkerbells.
Yes.
We have some mages and wraiths. And then we have the Autumn People, which,
Yeah.
I don't know. How do you feel about the whole Anton Stark sub-meta plot, or meta subplot, I suppose? Is a sub-meta plot just
Um,
a plot?
I think yes, I think it's the plot. I don't know. That will depend. How many books does it go across?
It's in this one. It's in The Autumn People. It's in the Book of Storyteller Secrets. It's alluded to in the Immortalized trilogy. So like most of first edition, and then I think by second edition they had mostly dropped it.
I think that's a meta plot.
Yeah.
Could be a minor meta plot. I don't know. I don't know. The mists keep making it slip from my mind. So, yeah, the Dantean here, it's, yeah, like the Autumn People and Dantean, I'd say, are very much like in the later Autumn People book and in second edition.
And it's very, if the Autumn People are the humans with exceptionally high banality, and the Dantean are the Fae who have been lost into banality but remember who they are and have weird twisted powers as a result, I find that compelling, like those two elements, because it's almost like a dark mirror of the Kithane hanging out with kooky humans who are dreamers and artists, so there's that sort of inversion. But
Yeah.
it's that psychiatry is evil part that keeps coming through.
Is it psychiatry? Oh, no, it is psychiatry in part, yeah. I mean, as someone who's been in the psychiatry system for a very long time and psychological health things, including starting in the 90s, the problem is it's the only example of it in Changeling.
Right. And it's presented as...
If it's like, these are the bad psychiatrists and psychologists, that's different.
Yeah.
And it's also doing, I think, falling a little bit into the, someone's got ADHD, so that's terrible that we've given them medication to help them. But...
Yeah. I mean, I imagine psychiatry in the 90s was very different than psychiatry today. So there's that. And there is obviously a long history of people being ostracized and institutionalized for being peculiar. But to kind of inculcate that systematically into the game is a little,
Yeah.
So
I can't remember how C20 handles it.
I think C20 kind of is more... It's more like what you just said. There's the bad psychiatrists and then the nice ones, or the more open-minded ones. So.
Well, he's a psychologist. Oh, that's a thing too. You're in the US and I'm in Canada, so I'm like, they're very different. They're very different professions here. So I get...
Well, yes, to be fair, I think in the system, Anton Stark is the sort of theoretical psychologist who informs the practice of the individual psychiatrists. So that's the...
Yeah.
Anyway, but they're a whole class of antagonists, which frankly haven't gotten a really... I mean, we have the Autumn People, but that's probably the shallowest possible write-up for such a, large section of humanity.
And also, I get the impression, just in general, when I talk about banality here, just even compared to second edition, there's just a lot more Autumn People.
Yeah, definitely. They're everywhere.
Yep. And then we have the Prodigals, where there's only 2 of them. It's interesting there's no mummies, because there was mummies in earlier books.
They were sleeping in Duat at the time. So. Yeah. But I do like how changelings, it's like, oh yeah, vampires are just redcaps who went weird. Werewolves are just puka who went weird. So
actually, does it say that here?
Maybe not about the Garou. The redcap thing is definitely in there.
Yeah, I don't think they're thought. Yeah. They're not puka specifically, because that's just weird. That, because this book does imply that, and it even mentions, I can't remember where in the setting thing. There's a whole bunch of other kiths mentioned, very briefly. And that's supposed to be just scattered. There's supposed to be tons of kiths, but this is you're playing a Concordia game. These are the most common kiths.
And it even does say that the most common kiths, and it implies there are many more.
Yeah.
At some point in here, they talk about the Minhune, the Tengu in Japan, and other ones. So there is that worldwide sensibility hovering under the surface.
Yeah, and I think they even imply one of the ones in China, and they're actually changelings.
So on the next page 270, we have a werewolf in Krynos form being glitter bombed. I'm not sure what to make of this art.
I thought it was like a Sailor Moon type transformation.
Oh, that could be.
With blood.
Sailor Garou.
Yes. We'll
Um,
add that make sure that to get one of the PCs in the Shadowrun
yeah.
World of Darkness game.
But then we get the introductory setting and sample story. So before the days of the quick start, there were core books that would occasionally tuck the intro story into the end of the book.
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts about this intro story?
I didn't really read it. I have such my brain just skips off of anything like this in any game, and I will make more of an effort when we're dealing with books that are entirely about it. But I just keep saying, "Oh my god, is this related to Sam Haight with Haight Ashbury?"
Wasn't that was part of the bad joke, wasn't it? I don't know. I don't think Sam Haight ever actually shows up in Changeling, but
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so what do you think of it? That's a better question.
I mean, so San Francisco is one of my favorite cities. I enjoy going there. I do think it is probably the best choice they could have used for the sort of sample city, because so vampire is strongly associated with Chicago in the initial, core book and the initial meta plot. Werewolf, I guess New York, because you had like the Sept of the Green and all of that.
I thought it was Appalachia.
That too. Anything that Jackie and Nikki were writing, I suppose, would be Appalachian inflected. Mage, I don't know that Mage has ever had like a single...
Las Vegas.
Well, sure, yeah, but before that, Wraith does not apply.
Wraith has Rome, basically, but dead Rome.
Yeah. Well, I've never played it, so I don't know.
Yes.
But so San Francisco makes the most sense to me for a Changeling setting, because the weirdness is so worked into the fabric of it, and a lot of it has eroded now because of the tech boom and everything.
Yeah, the banality ate it all. Whoa, maybe they are right about technology.
Not all of it, but a lot of it. So,
I've never been to San Francisco, unfortunately.
But, it's lovely. Anyway, back to this.
From Changeling anywhere. Yes, yeah.
So I like the setting choice. The characters are fine. The story hooks. Emperor Norton is one of my favorite historical figures, so I'm glad that he gets a nod here, because he is a very Changeling figure.
He would have to be, yes. They could set it some other city and they'd somehow have to bring in Emperor Norton.
And it connects to the Immortalized trilogy, which, I give them credit for, making this effort to connect the core book with a trilogy of game supplements, with a trilogy of novels, and represent that in the art materials and everything. And really, it gives it that feel of, I don't know, metaplot is the wrong word. It makes the world feel lived in, I suppose, because you're sort of peeking your head into this character level story, not the grand political things that are the backdrop, but the actual, hey, here's this ragtag group of heroes, just like you.
How San Francisco it's San Francisco 1995, not...
Yeah, before my time.
How San Francisco did it feel still, though?
It felt like parts of San Francisco that do still exist. There are little corners of it that still feel accurate.
Which is what it would really have to be anyway. For Changeling. It needs to be in the little corners.
Absolutely.
And then the story, you said it.
It's fine. It doesn't grip me, but it's fine.
Oh, the last words, that was just not really about Changeling.
No.
But that was interesting. So it's Mark Ryan Hagan. He, one of the sort of core people behind creating White Wolf. If you had to pick one person, it would be him. And he's talking about him leaving White Wolf and starting some sort of digital thing that I've never heard of before.
I don't think it ever came to fruition. I mean...
Yeah, Cry Wolf.
Settlement, the Centennial Project.
And you're supposed to have all the White Wolf books on a website? Yeah, VRML?
Virtual reality multi something. It's interesting, though, because you can see the threads of other stuff that did happen. So you had like the New Bremen, living setting on the White Wolf website. You had the forums. Now we have the wiki for like content from the books. So it does presage a lot of the sort of digital things.
It's kind of like a competitor to AutoCAD. It's oh my goodness. It was supposed to be like a collection of 3D models. which you make the city and then play in it, I think. So it's like Second Life or something.
Again, so 90s.
Oh, wait. So, but it also would tie into what when White Wolf got purchased by or merged with or whatever.
CCP.
Yeah. It's not that far from what their plan was.
Yeah.
Don't do that, I guess, is the answer. It won't happen.
Well, and then there's this Centennium Project idea. I don't know, it vaguely reminds me of like the Trinity universe that a couple years later was developed, this sort of future technology and science-based utopian tension game. But
like, what the heck's a neo-utopia?
Neo-utopia.
Yeah, it's a new utopia instead of that old one that we're tired of.
This is par for the course, though, I think, for these sort of last words pages, because they do appear at the end of each core book, or at least the original ones. And I find it a little bit sad because, you know, thinking about these plans that didn't happen, and I don't think, I mean, I haven't followed Mark Reinhagen's, you know, life or anything, but I imagine that he's done fine for himself in the long run, even if it didn't include these things. And it just makes me wonder, if you go back and read something that you wrote 25 years ago about all these plans that never happened, there's some kind of deep comment on glamour and banality in there. You know?
Yeah. But it's also interesting. It's like the first Changeling book was the guy you think of as like starting White Wolf, leaving White Wolf.
Well, he had finished the last game in the original conception of 5, I suppose.
Yeah.
So what more was there for him to do?
Yeah. So I think we've also textually proven that, you know, Changeling is part of the original 5 and that there were 5.
Yeah. It may have still been tentative at the first stages. I don't know that it actually, I mean, I don't think he's saying he's leaving White Wolf here. I think it's putting down the world of darkness.
Yeah, and he's also moving to San Francisco.
Right.
So
to join the coders.
Yep. Yeah, that says a lot about glamour and banality and Changeling in the world of darkness.
Yeah. But he also says, I was supposed to go to Hollywood and become some sort of writer-producer dude, but I'm going to go do this instead. So
I wonder what happened. I remember he did come back briefly around the 20th anniversary vampire stuff. But
yeah, he pops up once in a while, and that's cool.
Yep. So yeah, then next, like we said, the Art Realm and Bunk cards.
Ugh.
No Nightmare cards.
You read that beautiful last word section, because it is beautiful, and then you turn the page and you get Arts, Realms, and Bunks.
Yep.
And just like, no, put the cards down.
Character sheet's not so bad. Index, I didn't check if the index is useful.
It is. I'll vote for it.
Yep. And then
then we get ads.
There's and it's like an ad for a book I read, a Michael Moorcock book I read.
Back when White Wolf did fiction that wasn't World of Darkness related.
Yes, but I remember I did this before I read it before I knew what the World of Darkness was.
Yep.
I didn't realize it.
Or the Lunkmar books by Fritz Lieber.
And then Rage, the Werewolf Apocalypse collectible trading card game, tying in again just how big trading card games were back then.
Yep. And then Vampire, available everywhere.
And it doesn't even say which edition or anything. It's just, why are they advertising Vampire in the Changeling book?
Well, you know, they had to put something on the last page.
Yes. So, what did you think of this? Any final thoughts for this journey?
Well, it's weird.
The Chronos journey.
It's weird because it's not really a walk down memory lane for me because, I mean, I think I got this book long after Changeling had ended. Maybe not long after, but certainly after Time of Judgment and the lines folded and everything. So it was never my text for the game. But it's nice to sort of, go back and see the roots of the original text that I loved so much, and to see how those ideas. It's a book where you can tell the dreams of its creators are really worked into its fabric, and it's definitely a book that sort of practices what it preaches. I think they really just let themselves loose, and maybe some clunky systems came out of it, and maybe there were contradictions and it didn't always hold together, but that for Changeling more than any other game, maybe that's besides the point.
And I think for a first edition White Wolf game in 1995, they don't even really need all those caveats. It's not bad, actually. The mechanics are where the biggest issues are, but that's not surprising. And the setting stuff's really good. All the other stuff's really good, I think. Ambitious, and they change things, sure. But
It's leaps and bounds better than Vampire First Edition. I could say that.
Yeah.
In terms of how it holds together.
And it's has just as much dripping of theme and mood and stuff, if not more.
It drips like a saturated sunrise. Job well done, team. Well done, Mark Reinhagen, Sam Chupp, Ian Lemke, and Joshua Gabriel Timbrook.
We're going to be having a few different ideas. It's not just going to be book reviews, but we are going to be looking into going through more of the Changeling books as we're going through, and I'll keep you updated on what else to expect.
And I believe next up is the Storyteller Screen / Book of Storyteller Secrets. What fun it will be. I'd like to do a shout out on the front matter page with the credits in the lower left. It does say printed in Canada. So
nice.
There you go.
Yes, a lot of gaming books have been printed in Canada over the years. It's been Changeling the podcast.
I'm Puka.
I'm Josh. Hopefully it won't fall to the mists before the next podcast comes out.
Try not to. Eat some glamour.